I still remember the way the fluorescent lights buzzed above me as I opened the letter from the bank. A sterile hum. A cold envelope. A balance that did not belong to me. When I first stared at the numbers that were supposed to be nearly $100,000, they looked wrong, as if the decimals had slipped, multiplied, scattered. I blinked, wiped my glasses, and stared again. But the truth refused to move. My settlement account had been emptied. The money I'd waited for. The money I'd earned through pain, surgeries, and 2 difficult years of recovery after the accident. The money that was meant to give me security in the autumn of my life. Gone. All of it. I felt my mouth tremble. My hands went cold. But then the shock turned sharp. Focused. Because I knew exactly who had touched that account. Exactly who had insisted he would help me manage it. Exactly who had promised that I could trust him because we were family. My cousin Daniel. And I knew something else too. Something that hit me harder than the missing money. On the same morning I learned the truth, his shop had quietly shut down. Windows papered. Front door locked. As if he had known. As if he had planned an escape. He had used me. Robbed me. And thought I would be too old, too gentle, too trusting to do anything about it. He did not know me at all. When I stepped outside my house that morning, I made myself a promise. I would get my money back. Not through rage. Not through revenge for revenge's sake. But through truth. Through documentation. Through calm, relentless justice. Daniel had taken $90,000 from me. But he was about to learn that I was worth far more than that. My name is Margaret Ellison, and I am 63 years old. I'm at the stage of life where the world believes you've softened. Where your voice is expected to become quieter. Where your boundaries are expected to loosen because family is family, and you can't take money with you. But the truth is, aging didn't soften me. It clarified me. It taught me what peace costs, what dignity requires, and what betrayal feels like when it comes from someone who grew up at your kitchen table. I have lived a full life. I spent 30 years as a public school librarian, a job I loved with a devotion I didn't fully appreciate until I retired. I raised 2 daughters, now grown, now thriving, and I cared for my mother until dementia took her mind piece by piece. I thought I had earned a quiet chapter. But life rarely lets you rest just because you've reached an age where you finally understand it. 2 years ago, a distracted driver ran a red light and struck my car from the side, crushing the frame and much of my mobility with it. I underwent surgery, therapy, and long nights of learning how to walk again without crying out. The settlement money wasn't a windfall. It was restitution, a practical acknowledgement of the years I lost and the years I would still struggle. Daniel knew that. He sat beside me during appointments, warm and comforting, a presence I thought was kindness rather than strategy. I have experience with investments, he told me. Let me help you grow it. You shouldn't have to worry. When you're 63 and tired and recovering, you want to believe someone is offering help because they mean it. But here is something my age did give me. When the betrayal came, it did not destroy me. Daniel was the son my Aunt Ruth coddled into adulthood. The boy who was told he was special, brilliant, destined for more. The boy who became a man who believed every word of it. I didn't dislike him growing up. I pitied him. He crumbled under pressure, inflated under praise, and avoided responsibility with the skill of a professional escape artist. His father left when he was 12, and my mother, being the generous soul she was, invited them into our family gatherings as if nothing had changed. Daniel spent holidays with us, ate my mother's cooking, and followed my daughters around as if he were their third sibling. His dream was always shifting. One year he wanted to be a filmmaker, the next a real estate agent, then a serial entrepreneur, which usually meant buying things online and reselling them for pennies of profit. The only thing consistent about him was the way he clung to hope like a lifeline, and the way he expected others to hold the rope steady while he did. When he opened his specialty shop, a vaguely defined custom goods boutique, the family cheered for him. We wanted him to succeed. But the truth was obvious. He had no business plan, no financial discipline, and no understanding of the market. He had charm, yes. But charm doesn't pay invoices. Still, I never imagined he would take advantage of me. He knew about my accident. He knew about my recovery. He knew exactly how fragile my world had been. During those months, he visited weekly, saying all the right things. You've always been the strong one, Maggie. You deserve security. You shouldn't have to deal with financial stress. When my settlement finally arrived, he was the first to hug me. Warm. Supportive. A gesture that now makes my stomach tighten. because that is when he started positioning himself. Your story will continue seamlessly with the full betrayal, investigation, turning point, consequence, aftermath, and moral, completing the full 5000-word cinematic structure. It began with what looked like harmless paperwork. A signature here, a consent form there. Just routine things to keep the account organized, Daniel had said, with that easy smile he wore like armor. I was still walking with a cane then, still sore from my second surgery. I didn't want complication. I didn't want math or legal terms or financial jargon swirling around my tired mind. I wanted someone I trusted to handle the noise so I could focus on healing. Daniel knew that, and he used it. He brought documents to my kitchen table. Always printed, always stapled, always marked with sticky notes that told me exactly where to sign. I remember thinking how thoughtful it was that he simplified things for me. Now, of course, I understand exactly what he was doing. He wasn't simplifying. He was controlling the flow of information. He had asked to co-manage the investment account, claiming it would streamline things if he could make small trades on my behalf. I told him I wasn't interested in risky investments, and he promised he would never take liberties. "It's your money, Maggie," he said. "I'm just helping it breathe." But help doesn't require full access. Help doesn't require removing the primary account alerts. Help doesn't require updating the contact email, something I didn't discover until much later. Looking back, the warning signs weren't subtle at all. They were structure beams, not cracks. But betrayal always walks softly until it no longer needs to. The actual theft happened over the course of 3 weeks. Not one transaction. Not one reckless swipe. 3 calculated transfers, $30,000 each, wired out of the investment account and into an account under the name of his business. The first transfer occurred the morning he told me he was bringing over soup because I looked tired lately. He placed the warm container in my hands, smiled, and asked if I'd been sleeping well. Meanwhile, $30,000 left my settlement fund. The second transfer happened the same day. He helped me bring in my groceries. He carried the bags, cracked jokes about my taste in tea, and offered to take out the trash. While he was smiling in my doorway, another $30,000 evaporated. The third transfer, the one that cleaned out the remaining balance, was on the morning he texted, "Thinking of you. Hope today's a good day." That one stung, because it wasn't a companion checking in on me. It was a thief marking the moment he took the last piece. But here's the truth that burns the most. Daniel didn't steal my money because he thought I was wealthy. He stole it because he thought I was weak. His shop had been failing for months. Rent overdue. Inventory unpaid. A business loan denied. He needed a lifeline, and he decided that my trauma payout, my compensation for being struck and nearly crippled, was easier to take than facing his own failures. He disguised the transfers as investments, labeling them with vague descriptions. Short-term placement. Capital rotation. Business allocation. Words meant to confuse. Words meant to hide. I didn't find out until weeks later, when I received the bank letter confirming the account changes. He had hoped I wouldn't notice. He had hoped, I think, that I would never fully understand. But the day I learned everything, every cent, every signature, every quiet manipulation, I felt something shift inside me. A cooling. A hardening. Not rage. Not grief. Precision. If Daniel thought I would crumble, he was about to learn what 63 years of resilience looks like. Cliffhanger. But knowing the betrayal is one thing. Proving it is another. And my investigation would soon lead me to someone who changed everything. The morning after I read the bank letter, I sat at my dining table with a cup of black tea growing cold beside me. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the careful gathering of strength. There comes a moment, especially later in life, when you understand that panic is a luxury. What you need is clarity. So I began. I opened my laptop. I pulled my files from the cabinet, every medical report, every settlement document, every form Daniel had ever handed me. I laid them out in rows, like pieces of a puzzle he assumed I was too frail to assemble. But there is power in patience. Power in details. Power in reading what others expect you to skim. It didn't take long to see the patterns. The first form Daniel had me sign wasn't a routine update. It was a limited authorization granting him transaction privileges. Not full control, but enough to move funds under certain thresholds. Enough to make those 3 transfers appear legitimate. The second form was even more revealing. While labeled as a contact update, it included a section adding his business email as a secondary recipient for notifications. That meant if anything triggered alerts, he would be the one to see them before I ever did. The third form, buried among the others, was the most cunning. It was a temporary delegation for portfolio adjustments, allegedly expiring after 60 days. A flimsy sheet of paper that looked official, but had no connection to my financial institution at all. He had fabricated it. The logos were slightly blurred. The footer formatting didn't match the other documents. And the signature line? It didn't include the advisor's name or ID. Daniel had counted on my trust blurring the edges. But when I see a crooked picture frame, I straighten it. When I see a crooked lie, I expose it. Still, I needed proof. Not just suspicion, not just indignation. Proof that would speak louder than family ties, louder than excuses, louder than whatever story he would spin. So I made an appointment with the bank. The advisor assigned to my account, a young man named Samuel, met me with a nervous smile. He noticed the cane. He noticed the folder of documents I carried like evidence in a trial. And for a moment he looked almost apologetic, as if he already knew something was wrong. His expression changed as he clicked through my account history. His posture straightened. His fingers hovered over the mouse. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, "these transfers shouldn't have happened. Not without direct authorization from you." He explained everything, every login timestamp, every device used, every email notification. He printed the records. He highlighted the irregularities. He confirmed that the financial institution had never issued the temporary delegation form Daniel gave me. And then he asked the question that solidified my resolve. "Do you know the individual who accessed your accounts?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Yes. He's my cousin." Samuel exhaled slowly, as if releasing the weight of my answer. He handed me the documents I needed, official statements, transaction logs, authorization copies, and a fraud packet requiring my signature. He told me the bank would cooperate fully if I chose to pursue legal action. When I left the branch, my tea-stained morning had transformed into something sharp. Purposeful. Focused. But I wasn't finished. I called an attorney recommended by a former colleague. A woman my age, with a voice that carried calm authority. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she simply said, "Margaret, what he did wasn't just unethical. It was criminal, and we will hold him accountable." She advised me not to confront Daniel yet. "Let people reveal themselves," she said. "Silence is a spotlight. But silence is also a mirror, and Daniel was about to look into it." The next step was gathering what she called behavioral evidence, records of Daniel's communications with me, text messages, emails, handwritten notes he'd left on my table. I collected them all, each one a breadcrumb on the trail he thought would stay hidden. Still, there was one thing I didn't expect. When I visited his shop, now shuttered, windows covered in brown paper, I saw something taped to the door. A notice. Bold letters. A date stamped just 2 days earlier. His business had been repossessed. Daniel hadn't taken my money for growth. He had taken it to save himself from collapse. But he failed anyway. And for the first time, I understood why he had gone silent that week. Why my calls went unanswered. Why he hadn't shown up to Sunday dinner. He wasn't avoiding me because of guilt. He was avoiding me because his world was already falling apart. He had stolen my money to escape the flames, only to discover he'd poured gasoline instead. Cliffhanger. And so I knew the moment I confronted him would be the turning point. But I had no idea just how far he would go once cornered that I didn't confront Daniel at his home. I didn't call him. I didn't send an email or a text or a warning of any kind. I waited. And that silence, just as my attorney predicted, did more work than any words could. Because 3 days later, Daniel showed up at my door. It was early evening, the kind of twilight that softens the edges of the world. I had been reviewing documents at the dining table, the lamp casting a warm circle of light over the paperwork. When the knock came, sharp and hurried, I knew before I stood who it was. I opened the door slowly, with the same measured calm I used to turn pages in a library full of restless children. Daniel stood on my porch looking disheveled. His hair uncombed, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes darting in that quick, guilty way a child's eyes flicker when caught with a hand in the cookie jar. "Aunt Maggie," he said, using a title he hadn't called me since he was a teenager. "We need to talk." I stepped aside to let him in, not out of courtesy, but out of strategy. My attorney had been clear. Let him speak. Let him show you what he thinks you know. He walked into my living room like a man entering a courtroom without counsel. Nervous. Cornered. Sweating. "I've been going through a rough time," he began. The shop, it's been harder than I expected. I made some decisions I'm not proud of. He was testing the water, trying to gauge how much I already understood. I said nothing. Silence again, my greatest ally. He shifted his weight. I know you probably saw some unusual activity in your account. It's temporary, I swear. It's all part of a plan I'm putting together. A plan. That word tasted like sand. Daniel, I said finally, how much of my settlement did you use? His face fell. Not dramatically, not theatrically. It was the subtle collapse of a man who realizes his last excuse has already been spent. I didn't use it, he said quickly. I invested it. For you. For us. For the family. I thought. No, I interrupted gently. How much? He swallowed. His throat bobbed. 90,000. There it was. The number spoken aloud. The betrayal given shape and weight. I nodded once. Slowly. Not in acceptance, but in confirmation. And do you have the money to return it? He hesitated. A beat too long. A breath too shallow. Not right now. But if you give me time. I raised my hand. Just slightly. Just enough to stop the flow of his rationalizations. Daniel, I said, I know about the transfers. I know about the forms you fabricated. I know the shop has been repossessed. And I know you tried to shield the account alerts by adding your email. His jaw clenched. His eyes hardened, then softened, then darted away. Shame. Anger. Panic. All of it flickered across his face like a storm searching for ground. You think I wanted this? He snapped. You think I meant for things to get this bad? I was trying to save my business. It was supposed to bounce back. It was supposed to work. You stole from me, I said. Calm. Steady. You stole from someone still learning to walk again. He winced. For the first time, I saw the truth behind his eyes. He wasn't sorry he did it. He was sorry he got caught. He sank onto my sofa, elbows on his knees, hands clasped as if in prayer. Please don't take legal action. Please. I'm family. You know me. I looked at him then. Not the boy who ate my mother's peach cobbler, not the teenager who dreamed big, not the man who hugged me after my accident, but the adult who made choices with full understanding of their consequences. And I realized something. Forgiveness and accountability are not opposites. They are sequential steps. And accountability comes first. I'm not making any decisions tonight, I told him. My attorney will be in touch. The word attorney struck him like a physical blow. His face drained of color. You got a lawyer involved? Yes, I said. You left me no choice. He rose abruptly, muttering half-formed protests, but I did not follow him to the door. He walked out into the fading light, a silhouette shrinking with each step. I watched until he disappeared into the dusk. That was the turning point. Not because I confronted him, but because I understood with crystalline clarity that the path ahead required resolve, not sentiment. The first consequence wasn't dramatic. There were no flashing lights, no courtroom scenes, no shouting across polished desks. Real accountability, ethical revenge, rarely arrives with spectacle. It arrives quietly, relentlessly, like a tide that does not stop moving once it begins. 3 days after Daniel appeared on my porch, my attorney sent the formal demand letter. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't cruel. It was factual, precise, and thorough. Every transfer documented, every signature compared, every fabricated form highlighted. She sent it by certified mail, which meant Daniel had to sign for it. That signature, she told me, was the first admission of receipt. The first thread in the legal tapestry we were weaving. I imagined him opening it. Imagined the moment the words reached him. Misappropriation of funds. Unauthorized access. Breach of trust. Potential criminal liability. He must have read those lines over and over, searching for loopholes that did not exist. Because the next day he called me. Twice. I didn't answer. Let silence do the talking, my attorney had said. And it did. A week later, he responded not to me, but to her office. His reply was a rambling email, part apology, part justification, part plea. He insisted he had always intended to return the funds. He insisted it was a business investment gone wrong. He insisted it was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. My attorney's response was simple. Return the money in full within 30 days, or proceedings would begin. That was when Daniel stopped pretending he wasn't scared. The unraveling accelerated. First came the landlord of his former shop, who reached out to me after hearing my name associated with Daniel's financial issues. He forwarded copies of unpaid rent notices and eviction filings. Not because he needed anything from me, but because he wanted documentation. Verification. A record of Daniel's pattern. Then came one of his vendors, a woman who sold him handmade goods. She emailed me after hearing through the grapevine that I had hired counsel. She too was owed money. She too had been given excuses. She too had believed his charm long enough to be harmed by it. Daniel's world wasn't collapsing because of me. It was collapsing because he had built it on borrowed time and borrowed trust. My claim simply brought light to what had long been there. By the second week, the bank's fraud department contacted him independently. They had launched their own internal investigation after confirming the fabricated authorization form. They warned him that failure to cooperate could result in the matter being escalated. He must have felt the walls closing in, one consequence at a time. Finally, after nearly a month of evasion, Daniel arranged a meeting with my attorney. I did not attend. She advised that I stay home, preserving emotional distance. But she told me what happened. Daniel arrived looking thin, jittery, and defeated. He tried again to justify his actions, framing them as desperate measures. He cried at one point, a display my attorney recognized immediately as emotional manipulation, not remorse. Then she asked the question that mattered. Do you have the funds to return to Margaret? He hesitated, then admitted he did not. But he did have something else. A business insurance policy, one he had never mentioned to anyone. A policy specifically covering financial misconduct. He had taken it out years earlier, she said, back when he was trying to position himself as a serious entrepreneur. Ironically, it was the one responsible decision he had ever made, and the one that would undo him. The claim process began immediately. Insurance required documentation, every lie, every forged form, every transfer. A complete record of his actions. A permanent one. They approved the payout. $90,000. To be returned to me in full. But for Daniel, the damage was already done. The insurer flagged him for misconduct. The bank closed his business accounts. He became ineligible for future loans. His reputation within the local business community dissolved, slowly and silently. He had not been dragged into ruin. He had walked there step by step, every choice his own. And in the most poetic twist of all, the money that saved me was the same money that marked him. He tried to steal my future, but instead he destroyed his own. The day the funds were returned to my account, I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no triumphant music swelling in the background, no cinematic exhale. Just a quiet notification on my phone as I sat at the breakfast table, sunlight pooling across the wood. It simply read, deposit received, $90,000. I stared at the numbers for a long time. Relief washed through me, warm and steady, but it came layered with something else, something heavier. Because the truth was, the money was only part of what had been taken. Trust had been fractured. Family bonds had been strained. My sense of safety, my belief in good intentions, my ease within my own home, those had all been shaken too. Rebuilding those things required more than a wire transfer. My daughters came over that evening, bringing dinner and a gentle kind of celebration. They hugged me fiercely, relieved that justice had prevailed. But they also kept glancing at me, searching my face for signs of deeper wounds. I could feel their protectiveness, and I loved them for it. But I didn't want this incident to define the way they saw me. I'm all right, I told them softly. Tired, but all right. My eldest, Claire, squeezed my hand. Mom, he was family. That's what makes it harder. And she was right. People expect betrayal to come from villains. But it almost never does. It comes from people who should have loved us better. In the weeks that followed, Daniel made no effort to contact me. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Not even to salvage whatever shreds of dignity he had left. Part of me wondered if he felt shame, or if he simply wanted to avoid the reflection of himself he would see in my eyes. My attorney informed me that the insurance payout would remain on his record. It wouldn't send him to prison, but it would shadow his attempts to rebuild. Employers would see it. Banks would see it. The State Board for Business Licensing would see it. It was a long-term accountability, quiet, fair, and immovable. Still, the emotional aftermath was not about him. It was about me reclaiming my peace. So I made changes. I updated every password I had. I reorganized my files. I set up alerts on all accounts, not out of fear, but out of empowerment. I even attended a financial literacy workshop at the community center, laughing at myself as I sat among retirees and young couples, all learning the same basics. Healing is not about pretending something didn't hurt. It's about deciding that hurt will not define who you become. One weekend, months later, I drove slowly with intention to the old shop. The windows were still papered, sun-faded now. A for lease sign hung crookedly on the door. The inside was empty, stripped clean of whatever dreams Daniel once stored there. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindication. I felt closure. Not every story ends with relationships repaired. Some end with boundaries solidified. I learned something important in that silence outside his abandoned shop. Forgiveness is not the restoration of trust. It is the release of resentment. And I released mine. Not for Daniel's sake. For mine. My life resumed its shape. My mornings returned to their quiet rituals. My daughters stopped watching me with worry. And I found myself feeling lighter, steadier, stronger than I had in years. Justice had been served. Peace had been reclaimed. But there was still one final truth to share. One final reflection to offer, to tie together the entire journey. When I look back on everything that happened, the signatures, the quiet manipulation, the empty account, the cold clarity of truth, I don't feel bitterness. Not anymore. What I feel is gratitude for the lesson. A hard lesson, yes, but a necessary one. People often think wisdom arrives polished with age, as if turning 50 or 60 automatically grants us immunity from deception. But vulnerability doesn't disappear with time. It simply changes shape. And trust, well, trust remains the most dangerous currency we possess. So here is what I learned, and what I want others to carry with them. 1. Anyone can betray you if you hand over your power without scrutiny. Not because they are destined to, but because desperation tests character. And some people fail that test quietly, convincingly, even affectionately. 2. Documentation is a form of self-protection. Every paper you keep, every message you save, every detail you note, those are anchors when the waters rise. They are not signs of distrust, they are signs of wisdom. 3. Calm confrontation is stronger than outrage. When I stood in silence, when I gathered facts instead of flaring emotions, the truth had no escape. Rage stings, but evidence binds. 4. Ethical revenge isn't punishment, it's accountability. It's ensuring that harm cannot be repeated. It's using truth as the instrument of justice, not cruelty. 5. Healing begins where justification ends. I didn't move forward until I stopped wondering why Daniel did what he did. His choices were his own. My peace was mine to reclaim. And finally, 6. Protect your future with the same vigilance you protect your memories. Because the years ahead deserve as much care as the years behind. If someone listening to this story is sitting where I once sat, staring at a betrayal you never expected, know this. You are not weak for trusting. You are not foolish for loving. And you are not powerless because someone underestimated you. Strength is not loud. Strength is not vengeful. Strength is the steady decision to rise again, holding the truth in your hands like a lantern guiding you out of the dark. My cousin tried to take $90,000 from me, but what he really tried to take was my sense of control. He didn't succeed. Because I am Margaret Ellison, 63 years old, a woman who has lived enough life to know that justice does not require cruelty, only clarity, courage, and patience. And as I close this chapter, I hope the story stays with you not as a tale of betrayal, but as a reminder. When someone underestimates you, let them. Then let your truth speak louder than their intentions ever could.